Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought to yourself, why do they treat me like I don't matter? If so, leave a comment below, because you are not alone in that feeling. And what you're experiencing is far more meaningful than a moment of social friction. In fact, it may be the very doorway to a profound psychological and spiritual transformation. When someone doesn't respect you, whether it's subtle, like ignoring your words, or direct, like mocking your boundaries, something awakens in you, and something ancient, something wounded, and more importantly, something trying to be seen. And if you don't understand what that something is, you'll spend your life trapped in cycles of people-pleasing, reactivity, bitterness, or quiet collapse. But your soul was not meant to be small. You were not meant to shrink for others to feel big. You see, when someone disrespects you, it's easy to think the problem is entirely external, and often it is. But what matters more than what they do is how you respond. Because every time you feel that sting of being disrespected, the unconscious is giving you an opportunity, not just to defend yourself, but to discover yourself. Respect is not only a social transaction, it is a psychic recognition. When you are disrespected, it is not just a bruise to the ego, it's a signal that your boundaries, your dignity, your inner authority are being tested. And how you handle that test determines whether you evolve or regress. In analytical psychology, we know that the people around us often reflect the contents of our unconscious. If you continually find yourself surrounded by those who devalue you, mock your voice, or belittle your being, it is not because you deserve it, but it is because some part of your psyche has not yet learned to guard the self with sacred fire. So many individuals carry an inner wound, what I call the wound of invisibility. This wound originates in childhood, in environments where one's emotions were not acknowledged, boundaries not honored, needs not respected. That child grows into an adult who, unconsciously, expects the same dynamic from the world. The psyche repeats what it doesn't repair, and disrespect becomes familiar, so familiar that it begins to feel like home. But familiarity is not truth, and what is familiar can still be poisonous. To break this pattern, one must begin the work of what I call psychic sovereignty. That is, reclaiming the authority you've unknowingly outsourced to others. The authority over your worth, your voice, your time, your energy. Every time you let someone mistreat you without consequence, you send a signal to the unconscious, my boundaries are optional, and the unconscious obeys. But the moment you begin to act from the self, not the wounded ego, not the fearful child, but the self, you begin to create a new pattern, a pattern of wholeness, of respect born from within. Because true respect begins not when others treat you well, but when you refuse to abandon yourself to keep their comfort intact. One of the greatest illusions we carry is that we must be liked to be safe. But being liked and being respected are not the same. To be liked, you might need to comply, to please, to bend. But to be respected, you must stand, and standing is costly. It requires inner structure. It requires knowing who you are, what you tolerate, what you will no longer allow. So ask yourself this: when someone disrespects you, what part of you gets triggered? Is it the child who wanted their father's approval, the adolescent who never felt seen, the lover who gave everything and received crumbs? That is your work. Not to prove your worth to the one who disrespects you, but to tend to the part of you that feels small in their presence. Because here is the truth: disrespect from others often echoes the inner critic. The voice inside your head that says, you're too much, you're not enough, you don't deserve better. Until you confront that voice, you will keep attracting mirrors of it, because the outer world is shaped by the inner narrative. In dream work, when someone insults or harms you, it's not always about them. It is often a symbol, a part of your own psyche that has turned against itself. So the real question becomes, what am I doing internally that mirrors this external treatment? Do I speak to myself with contempt Do I ignore my own needs? Do I abandon myself to gain approval? If so, then the people who disrespect you are not just enemies, they are messengers. Now let me be clear, you are not to blame for the cruelty of others, but you are responsible for how long you allow their shadow to shape your self-image. To handle people who don't respect you, you must stop trying to make them see your value. You must see it yourself. You must feel it in your bones. You must become so anchored in your own dignity that their disapproval becomes irrelevant. That is not arrogance. That is wholeness. You don't fight disrespect with rage. You fight it with clarity. Clarity of identity, clarity of boundary, clarity of consequence. When you know who you are, what you stand for, what you will and won't tolerate, people feel it. Not because you shout it, but because you live it. Respect is not requested. It is commanded by the energy you carry. And if they still don't respect you, let them go. Release them. Not because you're weak, but because your nervous system deserves peace. You do not need to argue with someone who refuses to hear you. You do not need to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You do not need to keep proving your goodness to people allergic to accountability. One of the most powerful things you can do on your healing journey is to walk away quietly, firmly, without apology from anyone who chips away at your light. That is not rejection. That is spiritual hygiene. But even deeper than walking away is doing the inner work. Because if you leave the relationship without healing the pattern, you will find the same dynamic again and again. A new face, the same wound. You must ask, what is the lesson here? Sometimes the lesson is to speak up. Sometimes it's to enforce a boundary. Sometimes it's to stop hoping they'll change. And sometimes it's to see that the person who disrespects you most is you. The part of you that lets the phone ring even though your body says no. The part of you that smiles while you're dying inside. The part of you that stays silent when everything in you wants to scream. That is the first person you must confront. That is the first person you must reclaim. Because no amount of external validation will compensate for the internal disconnection from your own self. People can smell self-abandonment, and those who feed on power, who use control, who exploit vulnerability, they will find the one who doubts their worth. That is not your fault, but it is your cue to remember who you are beneath the people-pleasing, beneath the survival patterns, beneath the mask. You are not here to be palatable. You are not here to be tolerated. You are here to be whole. And wholeness demands that you no longer tolerate what fractures your soul. So how do you handle people who don't respect you? You begin by respecting yourself so fiercely that you become unrecognizable to anyone who once knew you as weak. And you hold that boundary not with aggression, but with sacred certainty. That is the beginning. That is the awakening. That is the return to the self. That is the return to the self. Because the truth is, how people treat you is often a reflection of what they sense you will tolerate. But what you tolerate teaches them how to engage with you. And if you've been tolerating disrespect, even in its subtle forms, dismissive tone, constant interruptions, invalidation of your feelings, it is time not to blame them, but to become deeply curious about the parts of you that permitted it. Curiosity is the beginning of healing, because when you replace judgment with curiosity, you stop punishing yourself for your past and start investigating your pain like a sacred text. Why did I stay silent? Why did I flinch instead of speak? Why did I laugh when they crossed the line? These are not signs of weakness, and these are adaptations, and when every adaptation has a root, a moment, an experience, a lesson taught too early by people who couldn't handle your wholeness. Somewhere along the way, your psyche learned it is safer to comply than to confront. And you believed that respect was earned by being agreeable, by being quiet, by being accommodating. But true respect is not earned by shrinking, it is earned by shining. The individuation process in Jungian psychology is about becoming who you truly are, not who you had to be to survive. And part of becoming who you truly are is recognizing that not everyone will approve of you, understand you, or celebrate you. Some will feel threatened by your boundaries. Some will mock your standards. Some will interpret your strength as arrogance. That is not your burden to carry. The moment you reclaim your respect for yourself, you become untouchable, not in the sense of being invincible, but in the sense that your worth is no longer negotiable. Your sense of self is no longer dependent on being validated by others. You can walk away, not to punish, but to preserve. You can speak your truth, not to convince, but to release. You can take up space not to dominate, but to exist fully. The people who don't respect you often reveal more about their own internal disorder than your shortcomings. Their disrespect is frequently a projection of their own unresolved chaos, their envy, their insecurity, their trauma. And when you internalize that disrespect, you carry their shadow as if it were your own. But the work of the soul is to return what is not yours, to lay down the burdens that were handed to you by others, and to begin asking, what do I believe about myself now? Not what they said, not what they made you feel, but what you know deep in your being to be true. Do you know your worth? Not conceptually, not intellectually, but cellularly. Because if you don't, the world will try to define it for you. And the world is often wrong. When you begin to respect yourself, something changes in your energy. Your eyes become steadier, your posture taller, your voice more certain. And without saying a word, people begin to feel the shift. Some will step back. Some will challenge you. Some will try to pull you back into the old version of yourself, the version who tolerated too much, stayed too long, explained too often. Let them be confused. Let them misunderstand. That is not your work anymore. Your work is to become so deeply rooted in your integrity that disrespect no longer even stings, it just feels irrelevant. This does not mean you harden your heart. It means you strengthen your boundaries. It means you become discerning, not bitter, powerful, not controlling, clear, not cruel. And when disrespect arises, you meet it with the calm fire of the self. The self, in Jungian terms, is not the ego, it is the wholeness of your being. It holds the opposites. It is the observer and the healer, the protector and the nurturer. The self does not need others to see its value. It knows its value because it exists. When someone disrespects you, the ego wants to fight, to win, to dominate, but the self chooses presence. It does not rush. It does not react. It responds from depth. And that depth may say, I will not continue this conversation. It may say, you do not have access to me anymore. It may say, I forgive you, but I no longer participate in this pattern. This is not weakness. This is the strength of spiritual maturity. Because handling disrespect is not about proving your power, it is about reclaiming your peace. Ask yourself this, how much energy have I wasted trying to make others treat me better? How much of my life have I spent bending so they wouldn't break? How much of my essence have I diluted just to be allowed to stay? And what would happen if, instead of chasing their respect, I gave it to myself? What would shift? Who would remain? What new life would begin? Because when you start to honor your time, your needs, your voice, your dreams, the people who once saw you as easy to use, easy to manipulate, easy to disrespect, they begin to fall away. Not because you changed, but because you stopped playing the role they needed you to play. You stopped being the mirror of their superiority. You stop being the echo of their control. And you begin to become real. And this is what they fear most, not your boundaries, but your wholeness. Because when you become whole, you are no longer predictable. You are no longer manageable. You are no longer dependent on their crumbs of recognition. And so they call you selfish, dramatic, unreasonable. Let them. Your soul knows the truth. The truth is, you were never meant to live in fragments. You were never meant to tolerate less than sacred connection. You were never meant to spend your life trying to prove what has always been obvious, that you are worthy, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. And so now, you return to that self, not through revenge, not through silence games, not through manipulation, but through alignment. Through the quiet, holy work of becoming someone who does not entertain what injures them. And if they don't respect you, let them walk, let them project, let them misunderstand, because you are no longer available for their lessons. You are now living in yours. And this is how you handle people who don't respect you. You become someone who doesn't need them to, because your respect for yourself has made theirs irrelevant, because your soul has grown too large for their approval to contain it. And because you are finally, fully, and fiercely ready to be who you were before they taught you to doubt it, this is not the end. This is your return,